Hi guys, it's Tony Robbins. You're listening to Habits and Hustle. Crush it.
Thank you for coming on Habits and Hustle. It's a pleasure meeting you. I would say in person, but it's not really in person. It's,
will be, though.
Virtual one day.
I feel like it's going to be. Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. I really enjoy, I obviously I read your book, but I really love your whole thing, your whole story, how you evolved and did what you did. I mean, it's not just, it's aspirational, it's inspirational. It's an amazing story. And Believe It is a great name for your book because no, it is. And like when I go through your stuff and when I've seen your things, it's like it resonated because a lot of like what you talk about, I talk about it as well. And you've done it, girl, to like the nth degree. I mean, selling your company, It Cosmetics, to L'Oreal for cash. Wasn't it 1.2 billion in cash? I don't even, how did you get cash? I want to know, but you're like amazing. Period.
Thank you. Well, you are too. So I'm excited. It's been a journey. So, and I've really been, it's funny because we have like mutual friends and stuff, but like they're really new in my life because for almost a decade, like all I did was like work and like trying to build the company, do it, you know what I mean? And so, that's why seeing that pajama party, I was like, I've got to go. Like, I want to be around girlfriends. Like, I need to get a life because for a long time I didn't have one. So.
It's hard to have one when you're doing when you do what you did to that level. And then, I mean, people think it's like, people are overnight successes, but you're a testament to, that is not the case. I mean, it's hard to have a social life and go to pajama parties when you are, you're building and grinding and hustling to create what you created. And it's funny because I'm not a makeup person by any stretch of the imagination, right? But I knew what It Cosmetics was because you guys have a concealer and a BB cream, or is it a CC? I can't remember. Is it a CC cream that I use?
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a crazy journey. And, I think part of it, because growing up, like I didn't see any type of business, like monetary success, any stuff like that around me. My parents worked super hard. But my journey was really different. Like I worked as a Denny's waitress and pushed grocery carts in the Safeway parking lot and all those things, like, and trying to pay my way through school and stuff like that. And I always kind of like had this like gut feeling like, okay, like, I'm meant to serve or give or something. Like I'm meant to do more than like what I'm doing right now and where I'm at. And it's been a decade of like literally starting with close to nothing. And then, when I launched this idea, this kind of dream, I had no idea how hard it would be. Like the first 3 years of the business was like hundreds of no's, like tons of rejection, some of it really brutal. I think so many people like have a dream and then they're like, oh, and then once you go after it, you're like, oh, this isn't happening like I thought it was going to happen. And there's like no proof around me that it's actually a good idea. And like, what was I thinking? And did I list, like, is my gut wrong? And it was really this crazy journey in so many ways of where it started to then building it into a $1 billion business. And, the thing when I, over the years, and really why I wrote this book, my first ever book, is really because, and it's such a big week right now, launch week of the book. I'm excited to share it with you and your whole community and everything. But this book is really like, oh gosh, I've noticed that you always see, like when you Google, right, you see the headlines like, oh, struggling waitress sells $1 billion company. And I get so many DMs on Instagram from women, especially saying like, oh, like, how did you do it? Did you just get lucky? Or like, did you all these things? And I'm like, oh, wow. It made me realize that so often, like, we don't ever see the story behind the story of stuff. And when we don't see that, then it's like when we go through our own setbacks and our own struggles, it's like we feel alone in them, or like it must be us, or maybe we're not the kind of person that success happens to, or whatever. And just seeing really DMs on Instagram and just getting these questions over the years, I'm like, you know what? Like, I had this moment where I realized I'm actually, for the first time ever, like gonna share like everything that really happened. And the book, Believe It, is a story, really my story of going from a girl who didn't believe in herself to believing in herself, and like not trusting herself to like learning how to trust herself, doubting that she's enough to like learning to believe she's enough. And what really inspired me to write it was like, oh yeah, it's my story, but it's also the story of so many other women and people out there right now who are like, you know, who have this like feeling like, you know, they're made for more, or they have a feeling like they have more to give, or whether it's like launch the podcast or start painting again, or like write the first chapter of the book, or, you know, join a dance class, whatever it is, like they know inside they're created for more, but like they doubt themselves anyway. And when I think back on my whole journey, like why I wanted to write this book really is for every person out there who really is dealing with doubt in their own head, whether it comes from their own head or from like the people around them, like other people's opinions, or just the simple fact that they're trying their dream and they're trying to build their business, or they're trying to, you know, get clients for their dance studio, whatever it is. And like the success around them isn't happening right now. And it's like, how do you know? How do you learn to hear your own gut and trust it? How do you learn to like break through all the noise of self-doubt and really learn to believe you are enough and to step into all that you are and all that you're called to be? And I think that so many people give up or stay in their comfort zone and never actually you know, become the person they're created to be because of so many reasons, right? And it's why so many people quit. And so anyhow, this book is really for every person just on their journey who wants like all the tips and lessons of how to do that. And I really share like so many personal and professional stories, right, of learning to do that. And then I also share the stuff I still am struggling with, where it's still a work in progress. And it's just raw and emotional and vulnerable. And honestly, I'm scared because I'm used to like, let me give a CEO talk in the boardroom. And this is like, oh no, this is the real shit. This is the real stories behind the stories that are really personal. But my prayer is just that it's not about me. And it's, you know, I'm donating the book. I'm donating 100% of the proceeds of the book. Like I'm not doing. Literally, the only reason I'm doing this book is because for me, it's the best, I think, best work I've ever done in my life. And that I know it's not about me. And my prayer is just that it helps every single person out there on their own journey of knowing they're enough and stepping into all of who they are. So that was a long answer,
wow.
But a real
a good one. I love it. You know, you gave me a lot of good little nuggets to go with there. First of all, where is the proceeds? Do you have a charity that you're going to be giving the?
No, two of them, but one of the big ones too is Feeding America, because right now, I mean, wow, what a year it's been for so many of us.
Yeah.
And there's tens of millions of families now that are food insecure, and you know, we're going to have a vaccine, but we're still going to go through a really tough season. And they're saying it could go, you know, well into 2021. And I think that right now, I think it's like the last number I read was 17 million kids are food insecure just in our country right now. So that's a big one. And by the way, I was a Denny's waitress. I know how to serve food. So now I'm just going to donate a lot of food.
I saw that. I think I also saw that you said something like you were at Denny's, but you lost the job because you talked too much and gave away too much free food.
Oh my gosh. Well, here, you know what's funny? Okay, this is the funny thing is, I don't know if I would love to hear too if you feel this same way. But I think so many times in our lives, like the setbacks we go through end up being like setups for like actually things we're supposed to do next or walk into next. And when I think about Denny's, so the Denny's I worked at, which was in Pullman, Washington, had massive operational issues. Sometimes it would take like an hour for the pancakes to come out, and people would get mad, right? So some people would leave, and then some people would stay, but then they wouldn't tip me. And I'm like, I have nothing to do with the pancake timing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so what's funny is, and I'm like kind of an introvert normally, and that job, I was like, dude, I'm trying to pay my way through school. Like I can barely afford my tuition, my bills. I'm like, I've got to get tips. And so I learned to talk, like, just talk to people and
to kind of get them kind of like okay with the wait.
Yes, because it was the longest wait for the pancakes to come out. Anyways, I eventually, got fired for talking too much. But I believe, and by the way, the cool thing that came out of it was like, I didn't know it at the time. I never knew one day I'd start a business or anything, but I had this lesson ingrained in me that like, oh, if your operations aren't right, it can impact everything else. And I remember, and like for a lot of us, when we launch a business or a dream or whatever, we want to do the thing we love, but we don't want to handle the operations. We don't want to, and I just remember that lesson. And I remember when we created It Cosmetics, I'm like, okay, we've got to figure out the operational infrastructure, because if that's not there, it's like everything else collapses, even though operational infrastructure is not my passion. But I thank Denny's for that lesson.
For that first lesson. Yeah. It's 100% true. I always say that too. I feel like so many times when things were disappointments, it ends up working. It does end up there. Kind of like a silver lining does happen, or another opportunity arises that you never even knew existed because of that setback.
Yeah.
And it's a very important it's a really important life lesson, or like an important thing to remember in those darker times when things are not working.
And it's hard, right? Because when you're in that dark moment, like I can think of so many major no's in my journey of building the company where I thought like, oh my gosh, everything's on the line. I need this investor to say yes, because I don't know how I'm going to make it if he doesn't. Or I am dreaming for years of being in this retailer and like they keep saying no, but I need this yes. And then it's like those big rejections, right? Sometimes it's a friend rejecting us. Sometimes it's someone we're totally into that we're dating, and then we're like, oh, so they're just not that into us. Those things hurt, like they hurt and they suck and they are devastating. And there's a million nights I cry myself to sleep, but like, so it's hard to do it. But like, when I look back at everything, I just know that's true, that our setbacks, no matter how painful they are, really are set up. So like if we're open to,
if you're open to that, and open to seeing the other opportunities or the windows that are opening when the door slams on your face, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So a couple of different things again that you were saying. Number one, that you were, and you open with this in your book, and I've heard you talk about this, is that you very much trust your intuition and your gut, and it's more really. If you can give anyone, I saw you say this you said this in the book, your gut and intuition is more important than other people's advice, which I'm a strong believer in, right? But it's very difficult for some people to do that, right? Because of that self-doubt, because of that fear. How did you kind of hone that skill of really listening to your gut?
Yeah.
Was there like a a moment in your life, or like some kind of turning point when you kind of decided to kind of go that way, or explain that?
Yeah, I think that it's for every person. I think it's a journey, and I think a lot of people don't start the journey. I think that I believe we all have an intuition, like an inner knowing. And I think what happens for so many of us is that, to your point, the noise of self-doubt is in our own head. We have other people's opinions all around us. We have experts who like are credible, and touted visionaries like saying how stuff should be done, right? In some cases. And there's so much. We turn on the news and people are fighting. We have there's so much everywhere that it ends up being so noisy that we almost can't even hear our own gut anymore. And a lot of people never ever really just develop that ability to just get still and hear it. And a lot of people have heard it in the past, but it's been a long time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Or they think they heard it and it turns out to be wrong. And then they start doubting themselves. So for me, it's been a journey. And one of the big things is when I look back, because there are so many times where I doubted my gut, and I was like, oh, you know what? They're experts for a reason, or this person's had so much success. Let me just listen to them, even though it's not quite sitting right with me. And when I look back at a lot of the mistakes I made, they were all really around times when I went against my own gut. And so it's really a thing I think we develop over time, really by paying attention. And I think we're all born with it, though. I think we have it. And then I think our life lessons build on it. But it's sometimes it's simple. It's we date a dude and we're like, oh, he's sketchy, but we don't want to believe it.
Yeah,
and you're
exactly.
Oh, maybe his phone did break. And
Yes.
Maybe he just fell asleep last night and I couldn't get a hold of him. He didn't disappear. He wasn't somewhere else. Right. And we kind of know. And
we know.
We know. And we choose not to. And I think that carries through our whole life. And, for me, getting still, it's a practice. It's a journey. But getting still, even 5 minutes a day, and that's hard. A lot of people try to get still, whether it's to meditate or in prayer, whatever it is. But when you try to get still for 5 minutes, no phone, no anything. Sometimes I just go in the closet because I have 2 little ones.
No, me too. I know. I do that all the time.
And I just literally try to get still. And I'm not perfect at it because I try to hear my gut. And sometimes I end up thinking of my to-do list or whatever else is going on. But I really work on it to tune into that. And when I look back, there's, so many stories that I share in this book I've never shared before. But one of the most powerful lessons in my entire career and my life came down to a moment when we got one shot on QVC. And what had happened is, we'd been building from our living room for 3 years and hearing no from everybody. And QVC said no several times. And one day I got their head guy, Alan Burke, who'd built this $1 billion beauty empire, on the phone. And I thought for sure if he's going to give me a few seconds of his time, it's going to be a yes. And how
did you get him on the phone? How did you get him on the phone first?
Yeah, by obsessively sending products for 2.5 years.
Okay.
LinkedIn, I would go on LinkedIn and send messages to any person that worked at QVC. It didn't matter to me what their job title was. And I tried to send them products if I could get them.
Yeah.
And I finally begged his assistant to just set up a call with me. Could you just get him to review the product? So it was a lot of that.
And I thought you were going to say that, what I thought was super clever, before you even tell everyone the QVC story, which I think is a very poignant point in your career, or at It Cosmetics.
Yeah.
You called that, was it Marie at itcosmetics.com?
Yeah.
That's your middle name. And you use that as you pretend that was your PR person, which is so scrappy, so clever and gritty. I loved it. I highlighted it really, really strong.
I love that you have a highlighter in your hand right now. I'm so excited. I love it.
This is my best friend, by the way. This is this highlighter lives with me.
You know what? So the Marie story, here's the
That's
thing.
amazing.
I was like, let me just share all of it because I don't want people to just go, oh, that's great. These kind of things happen to other people. But for me, I can't afford to hire anyone or whatever, right? But we all go through that. And so I share so many stories of how did I figure this out with no money or no connections or whatever. And it's sometimes you got to do what you got to do because I couldn't afford to hire anybody, right? My husband and I, we wrote the business plan on our honeymoon flight and, both quit our jobs and thought, oh, we'll take our small amount of savings, pour it into making the best product ever, hiring an advisory board, and then the product is going to sell. And then I didn't realize, oh, it's not that easy, and didn't realize it would be 3 years before I could afford to pay myself. And so in those early years, like I couldn't afford to hire people who knew what they were doing in like all these areas. And so, you figured out that, I would Google like everything, FDA regulatory compliance and how to write the labels on the packaging and like just everything. And I got to the point where I'm like, okay, my name's Jamie Marie Kern Lima. And so Marie, which is my middle name, got her own email address, right? Marie@itcosmetics.com. And she became head of PR, head of customer service. Like she was a hustler. And so she would like email, the Today Show, Good Morning America, and be like, great news. Our founder, Jamie Kern Lima, is available for an
I love it.
And we're launching a new product. Like, and just like, so Marie was a hustler. And Marie got just as many no's, a lot more ignores, but she hustled and she got some press. Good
for her.
Yeah. And so, I don't know, listen, it's like, the journey, it's hard. And I feel like these stories and so many of the stories I share in the book, I feel like they're so important to share because now we're sitting in this world where we like see everything on social media. And a lot of times people, whether they want to, write a book or maybe they have an idea for a business or a product or something, but they're like, oh, they see everyone on social media like, oh, everyone's already done my idea and it looks so good, like it's working so well for them. And then they talk themselves out of their own purpose and their own calling and their own truth, right? And I think like what's so important is like, oh, just because you see, in my case, if you Google, you see like, oh, $1 billion success story, whatever. It's like, oh, no. Like, here's what really happened. And if someone's listening right now and they're going through a season of rejection and a season of disappointment and a season of setbacks, I just feel like it is so important to know that when we go through those, we're not alone. And it's no indication of the potential of your idea or your success or your dream or your calling. It's like, oh no, like we're all in this together. This stuff happens to almost all of us, and here's the things I did that helped me not quit and helped me keep going and helped me believe even when other people didn't. And one of my biggest, only if you want me to share it, but one of the biggest lessons on just trusting your own gut versus, what
I want you to talk about that. That's a huge, the QVC story. That to me was like a major pivotal moment in your entire career. So I just wanted to hear first how you, I want you to tell whoever who's listening, how did you finally, because it wasn't like this was your first time contacting QVC. It was many, many times. It was no. You were told no by Sephora and by private equity people who were rude to you. And
and your question about getting a hold of that guy.
Yeah. How did you finally get in touch with them?
When I finally got through, his assistant finally set up a call. I thought for sure. I was like, oh my gosh, Alan Burke is getting on the phone with me. Like, this is going to be like, I was freaking out, like pacing my office, which was our living room. And I was, and I remember when we finally got on the phone call and he's like, hello, Jamie, this is Alan Burke from QVC. And I'm like, okay, I'm like trying to tell myself like they'd be lucky to have us. Like I'm like, hi, Alan, like nice to meet you. And he was so kind and awesome and all those things. And he said, listen, we've reviewed your products with all the buyers here, and it's unanimous. It's a no. You're not the right fit for QVC or for our customers. And I'm like, oh, but I am the right fit. And let me tell you why. And like I just tried again and poured my heart out. And it was a no. And so I thanked him for his time, and like literally tears are streaming down my face because I didn't know at this point, we're a few years in, like, how are we going to make it? And that day I remember like going to bed, crying myself to sleep. And I don't know if you've ever had this happen where you like get really bad news and then you go to bed and then you wake up the next morning and you hoped it was a dream.
Yes, of course. Happens all the time.
Yeah. And then it's like, oh, it wasn't. And it was like, that was what it was like for 3 days in a row. And anyhow, we had a season of several years of no's from everybody. The QVC, and by the way, QVC was my dream because my whole life, for like similar to so many of us, I had always seen magazines and commercials on TV with these models that had perfect skin and all these things. And I remember growing up, seeing all of them and going, oh, I want to aspire to look like that. But then always somehow also feeling like I wasn't enough when I saw them. And I didn't put this all together until my journey of getting rosacea on my cheeks, which is, hereditary skin condition, and trying everything I could get my hands on and none of it working, and making that decision that, you know what, I'm going to quit my job as a journalist. And my whole life, I've dreamed of being a talk show host, and that I love other people's stories, like not mine, other people's stories. And I thought I was going to do that my whole career. And when I had this moment, like, my gut just kept telling me, like, nothing's working for you. There must be so many other people out there like you who maybe have skin challenges or whatever, and they just like given up on makeup altogether, whatever. And I just, that feeling, I knew I needed to do it. And so anyhow, so part of my whole mission from the very beginning was to not just create a product that worked for me and that helped other people, but to create a beauty company where like all the models I use and call beautiful models and mean it are every age and every size and every skin tone and every skin challenge. And I wanted to shift culture in the beauty industry around inclusivity. So I had this dream of QVC for that reason, because it's live. It's live 24/7 television to 100 million homes. And I was like, oh, I can go on and like take my makeup off, show my bright red rosacea, and show for real how the product works, not in a magazine or TV ad where you don't even know if they're wearing the product. You know what I mean?
Right.
And let me put like real women of every age and size and, skin challenge and really try to shift close. So I dreamed of QVC. I just felt it in my gut that I was supposed to be on QVC. And so to get Alan Burke on the phone and to have him tell me, you're not the right fit for our customers or for QVC, was devastating. And, and it's hard. And it was one of those moments for me where I had to figure out how to turn down the volume, in this case, on his opinion, and like try to just turn up the volume of my own gut that said, okay, because every time I would check in with my gut and I would hear it, it's like, you're on the right track. You're supposed to be doing this. And I'm like, is my gut wrong? Because no one else is believing in it. The experts that have done incredible things aren't believing in it, right? And those are the tough moments. And I think those are the moments that make people give up, that make people quit, that made people talk themselves out of their own dreams and their own truth and never step into all that they were created to be, because it's so easy and it makes so much sense in our heads to trust the people who are experts who are telling us how to do it. So anyways, it was a moment where, and I did a lot of things wrong in my journey. And I talk about so many of those in the book too, but this was one of the things I did right, where I was like, you know what, my gut is telling me to keep going. And I did. And we eventually were at a big beauty expo, and a QVC host came up to the booth. There were 6,000 women there, and I was demonstrating our product, and she loved our product, and something, she had this feeling to come up to me and to try and give me a shot. And long story short, we got one shot on QVC. And this is where one of the biggest life lessons and business lessons in terms of trusting your gut over experts or anyone else, happened. And so we had one shot and 10 minutes on QVC. And here's the thing is it's a consignment deal in beauty, which what this meant. And by the way, we were only selling 2 to 3 orders a day on our website at the time. And I didn't know how we were going to make it. Like, had no idea how we weren't going to go bankrupt. And we got this shot on QVC. But they ordered 6,000. We had to sell over 6,000 units of Bye Bye Under Eye Concealer in this 10-minute window in order to hit their sales goal or not come back. And I was like, okay, but the challenge was we had to pay for it, manufacture, and ship it all into them. And then if it didn't sell in that 10 minutes, we had to take it all back and not be paid for it. So everything was on the line. We didn't even have the money to do this. So we applied for SBA loans, and to the first 22 banks said no, and bank number 23 said yes. And we got enough money just to cover the purchase order.
Because that can bankrupt a company as well.
Oh,
People don't understand.
2 seconds into absolutely. And, for entrepreneurs, and you should never accept a purchase order you can't afford to lose ever. And we couldn't afford to lose this one, but we also had almost like run out of options. Like it was like, okay, we're going to just go all in. And so knowing this and knowing it came down to this one shot on live TV in 10 minutes, we hired these third-party consultants, and all of them told me the same thing. And by the way, they're great, and they help so many people sell well on television, and all those things. They know what they're doing. And we worked with them, and they all told me the same thing. They're like, okay, if you want to have a chance, if you want to have a shot, because most people, when they launch on QVC, it's like one time, they never come back. It's really hard.
Oh, I know.
Right?
People don't even understand those statistics. I mean, it's very, very rare that people have the story that you had, right? Where you just sell out, whatever. But we'll get to that in a second. But and that's when companies die on the vine right in that moment.
Yes. And I've seen it happen so many times too live, and it's the most devastating thing. And because it's everyone's dream, and to get one shot is even that part. I mean, so for us, it was 3 years of hustling and trying, getting no's. And so we got this one shot. And when we hired these experts, they all told me the exact same thing, which is, if you want to have a shot at success, here's what you need to do. You need to use these type of models, which were the same type of models I'd seen in commercials my whole life that made me feel like I wasn't enough. And, this age, this, all those things, and do your sell this way. And I would argue with them and say, okay, but if I'm sitting at home watching this, right? And let's say I'm 75 years old and I'm, have hyperpigmentation, whatever it is. If I don't see anyone that looks like me, instead I see someone who looks like they're 12 with pop, how do I know it's going to work for me? Right. And I'd be like, and listen, I'm going to take my own makeup off and show my rosacea on national TV. And they're mortified. And I'm like, because if I were at home and I had rosacea too, I'd want to know, what is the product going to do? What does it really work? All those things. And it was so tough because they're like, listen, and they wanted the best for me. They were telling me the very best advice they knew. And I learned a huge lesson, which, by the way, this applies to everyone, no matter what situation you are in life. When other people, even experts, even friends, even loved ones, when they're giving you their advice and their opinion, they can mean so well, but they are only capable of giving it to you through their own lens. Right? Of limitation, their own lens of experience. And the other thing I've learned too, especially when it comes to experts, is even people that are considered visionaries, and they are in so many ways, if you're doing anything that is new or novel or different, and even if you're doing something that's already been done a million times, but it's you doing it authentically, which means it's a different take on it, right? So by definition, it's new. Anytime you do something new, most likely experts aren't going to believe it's going to be successful and they're not going to know they're doing this, but subconsciously, they've never seen proof that it is going to be successful because it's never been done before. And so had I learned that lesson earlier, I would have saved myself so many nights crying myself to sleep when so many of them didn't believe that this new way of doing a beauty company would work. And so anyhow, there I was with one shot in front of me, a 10-minute window to either literally change my whole future or go bankrupt, which would also change my whole future.
Yeah, right.
And it felt way too heavy for me to handle. And I flew out to QVC a week before our one shot on air. And I had this rental car and I sat in the parking lot all alone of QVC, just staring at the front door, watching people go in and out all day. I don't know why I parked there, but anyways, I was just there. And
Why did you go a week early?
It was so heavy for me that first of all, I got there and I started going, okay, I once heard Olympic athletes visualize themselves landing the triple axel or standing on the podium. I'm like, I'm going to try that. So I sat in that car and I was like envisioning the sold out sign coming up on the screen. I was envisioning real women. I sat there, I prayed, I cried. It felt so heavy. At one point I asked God to take it from me because I couldn't handle the pressure. And I wasn't scared for television. I just knew that this one shot was either going to, I was
make or break.
Exactly. When I would watch people go in and out of the doors, I was like, okay, the next time I walk through those doors, when I walk back out, it's either going to be life-changing or it's going to be, devastating. And I also just needed that time to really know what to do, because it's really hard when everyone else is saying one thing and our gut's like, oh no, but that's not authentic to why you're doing what you're doing. But I didn't have a chance to try it both ways. And I just remember sitting in that car trying to decide, okay, do I cast all the models they're telling me to have a shot at success? Or do I risk it all and take my makeup off and show real women of all shapes and ages and sizes and skin tones and skin challenges? And I just sat there and I knew what to do. But it's so hard when our mind tells us one thing and our heart and our gut is telling us another thing. And
absolutely.
Right. And at one point I just sat there in the car and I had this moment where I was imagining who she is watching. And, I think of so many different types of women. And the one that just would always jump out at me is I would imagine, for some reason, I don't know why, a single mom in Nebraska, folding laundry, who is too busy to remember that she matters and that she's beautiful and that she's worth it, all those things. And I had this moment in that car where I was like, you know what? I would rather if she's going to give me 5 seconds of her precious time to see me on QVC in the background of whatever she's doing, I would rather have her glance up on that television, not buy anything, and see me standing there showing women that look like her and calling them beautiful and meaning it. I'd rather do that than sell a shitload of product and stand for nothing. You know what I mean? It was that moment where it's I knew what I had to do, but sometimes we know and it's not easy.
Yeah, exactly. And then we acquiesce to who the expert is or who the person is we're supposed to listen to.
Yeah.
And you didn't.
Well, and it was, I remember the moment. So that, the count. So I was standing there, I'm in the studio, we're about to go live and they have this big countdown clock, right? And it's at 10 minutes. And I just remember all of a sudden the cameras turn on and you see the on-air thing go on. And I was freaking shaking like a leaf, and I'm not nervous for TV. That's what I did for my
Yes, you do for a living.
Yeah. It was all the pressure. And,
yes, of course.
And I was and then I saw the clock go 9:59, 9:58. 9:50. I was like, oh, and you can't try to sell or nothing sells. You can't freak out or nothing sells. But inside, I'm like, okay, this is bigger than me. I can't get in my own head. My dress was too tight that day. It was a whole. Anyways, I was like, I cannot get in my own head. And I just remember the show. I remember the moment they pulled my bare face before a shot on national television. And I just remember this whole thing. And then I went over to all of our models who are all different ages, shapes, sizes, everything, skin tones, skin challenges. And I all of a sudden I remember we were and by the way, if you're not doing well, let's say you're 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minutes into your 10-minute segment. Yeah. If you're not doing well, they know by the second if sales are happening. So your clock jumps down to 2 minutes and in your head, or 1 minute, you're like, oh, I just lost a product, or I just lost this much money, right? Because they don't mess around. It's and
so they don't even necessarily give you the whole 10 minutes.
Exactly.
So they know really quickly on if you're going to even.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you think about Target or Walmart, you get shelf space, and if you don't do well, you lose your shelf space, right?
Yeah.
And
don't you spend money on those shelf spaces? Don't you? Don't you spend money on the? Yeah.
Probably, yeah. But with QVC, it's the same thing. It's just business, but it's more immediate, literally right then and there. So all this pressure's on. And I just remember praying that my clock did not jump down, right? And it's all the minutes are going by. And then I was showing, all of our real women, all the models. And then I remember there was about a minute left. And the host is like, the deep shade is almost sold out. The tan shade is almost gone. And I'm like, and then I remember literally there was 1 minute, or no, 1 second left. And the sold out sign came up across the screen. And I was like, and literally these tears started streaming down my face. They cut and went right on to the next studio, whatever item was next, a Dyson vacuum or something. I don't remember. And then all of a sudden I was just like sobbing hysterically. And then my husband came rushing through the double doors of the studio. And I was like, real women have spoken. And he's like, we're not going bankrupt. And I was like,
oh my God.
And it was this crazy story. And, that one airing turned into 5 that year, and then 150 the next year. And then we did over 250 shows a year for 8 years and built the largest beauty brand in QVC's history. And it is right now at this moment, to this
Still?
day. Yeah. Yeah. And so, and I only share that because it was 3 years of hearing no. It was 3 years of even Alan Burke saying you're not the right fit for QVC. And so many of us get that opposition, and that's what we listen to, right? And it's
yes.
easy. And it's like Jay-Z. Jay-Z said that famous quote, like he said, the genius thing we did was we didn't give up, right? And
yes.
So many times it comes down to that, and also just figuring out how to believe that it's possible to succeed. It's just not happening yet. One more. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead. And then I'll ask you after.
You said earlier about when we were talking about how our setbacks turn into setups, and like sometimes we can't see it at the time. And so one more thing just to share is Alan Burke, who had said, no, you're not the right fit. After we launched on QVC, oh my gosh, he ended up becoming, I got to know him so well, and he became like one of our greatest champions, one of the best advisors we've ever had. And then he became one of my closest mentors, and he is to this day. And he is so freaking brilliant. It's the biggest blessing. But anyways, he ended up retiring from QVC, and we ended up hiring him in a paid position on our advisory board. And I had this moment where I realized, oh my gosh, the guy that rejected me is now working for me. And I was like, listen, like no one can tell you you're not the right fit. Like no one can, right? And the last thing I'll say about that, and this is important too, because even though all the years of no's hurt, Sephora rejecting me hurt, Alan Burke saying you're not the right fit hurt. Like sometimes those painful no's are like actually like serendipitous grace, like in our favor, right? Wrapped in this like package labeled painful rejection, because what I later learned was Alan Burke was right all along. I just didn't know what I didn't know. And had he said yes to us when I wanted him to, we would have failed, because we did not have the infrastructure you need to support the back end of the business for an account like QVC. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And similarly, we didn't have the right team to be able to support an Ulta or a Sephora yet in terms of education across the country. Like we built up a team of over 1,000 employees, but during the years when we were getting told no from everybody, I didn't know what I didn't know. And thank goodness we didn't get a yes sooner, because we would have failed and we may not have gotten another chance. And so, a lot of full circle moments. They're so hard to see when we're in them, but when we keep going, we get to that point where we have those things happen.
Well, I was going to say, whatever happened to Alan Burke? Because why did he say, my question was, what, did he ever give you a reason why he said no? So did he tell you on that phone call when you spoke to him?
No,
why?
He just said, you're not the right fit for us. We reviewed your brand, our customers.
How did he know what your back end was? How would he know?
I think
right. So do you think he was just making that up because he felt silly that he said no to the?
He didn't know what our back end was. He just said no. I think that he thought our packaging wasn't ready and that we weren't ready, but he didn't know I think some people call it the universe. Other people call it divine orchestration. Other people call it God. I really believe the famous saying that things happen for us, not to us, right? So he didn't know what our operational infrastructure was. He just probably knew in his own gut to say no. You know what I mean? And that we weren't ready or whatever. And that's why I think like sometimes things don't make sense when they happen against us. But like when we learn to trust ourselves and trust that things are divinely orchestrated, whether some people call it the universe, some people call it God. For me, faith's a big deal, but like that,
I know.
believe that.
Have you always been very religious, or did you kind of come to it more later on in life?
I was raised where my parents made me, keyword made, forced me to go to church every Sunday.
Okay.
And I never connected with it growing up. Like I didn't whenever the pastors would give sermons, I literally couldn't connect with any of it. I would tune it out. I would scan the church pews for boys, cute boys, and I would just like count down the minutes, like hoping it would end. And, I always prayed and I always believed in God growing up. And then my journey was really different of God doubt, a lot of God doubt. And what I mean by that is like, I always wanted to see new cultures, new experiences, and new people who didn't look like me or pray like me or love like me. And I just wanted that so badly. And so I was always, that's why I worked so many jobs. I was like, I got to get out and I got to get somewhere else and experience new things. And I went to school, and then I ended up going to graduate school in New York City. And when I did that, I was for the first time really around so many people who had so many different faiths and a lot of people with no faith. And I was around so many science-based arguments on why God doesn't exist. And they all started to really make a lot of sense to me, right? People that believe, like they don't believe in anything unless you can see it, prove it, touch it. For with faith is not required. And it really started impacting me. And there was a season I went through. I was working as a news anchor in Portland, Oregon. And in my mid-20s, I tell this crazy story in the book as well, but I found out by surprise, completely unexpectedly, that I was adopted. And
that's a crazy story, by the way.
Story, right? And then that's another story, like 5 years of rejection and whole thing. There's a lot.
And how you found out? Can you tell the story? It's unbelievable how you found out. It's like a crazy way for a young girl to kind of get that information.
Yeah, I mean, my parents never told me. They never wanted me to know. And they had another baby that had passed away when she was 9 days old. And so my whole life, I just thought I had an older sister, and that they kept a baby picture of her and me on the bedside dresser. And I'm not going to do the story justice compared to the book, but I'm going to keep it short because I know that you don't want a 25-hour details. But and so anyhow, my dad was the dad who raised me my parents divorced. He had remarried and they were going through a divorce. And long story short, he called me and said, "Hey, Jay, could you get a copy of those baby pictures of you and your older sister, Jody? Could you ask your mom if she has another set? I can't find mine." And both my parents had always kept them on their bed table. And I always knew she was a year older than me. And that was all I knew. So anyways, it was Christmas Eve, and I stopped by my mom's house to get a set of pictures, and Paula was out in the living room, and my husband now. And I walked into her bedroom with her. So it was just me and her, and she handed me the two pictures. I'm like, "Okay, thank you." And we're just chatting and whatever. And I just glanced down at the photos, and then I turned them over, and I saw that, mine said July of 1977 and hers said March of 1977. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's only a couple months apart. And I'm like, "Mom, how does Jody say March?" Right? And she could have, and by the way, I was 26 when this happened. She could have said, "Oh, someone wrote the date wrong," right?
Right. She could have easily said that.
Yeah. Instead, she just stopped and she looked at me, and I've never seen a look like this in her eyes. And she's the closest person to me, my whole life. Right. And she just looked at me and she said, "Well, I think you might have suspected this, but you're adopted." And I'm like, "What?" And it was this moment. And then everything that happened after that, which I go into, anyone who's gone through a hard season and gone through somebody pulling the rug from underneath you. And whether it's a partner or a family member or a friend, like when you think you know who they are and you think like who you are, and all of a sudden that gets pulled out from underneath you. It's a wild journey to go on emotionally in terms of identity and everything else. And so I'll save so much of those lessons and all that stuff in the book. But
it's in the book, and it's great life lessons,
and it
for
turned
sure.
into 5 years of me trying to search for my birth mom and having thousands of women hang up and all those kind of things. And so it was really a wild journey. And oh my gosh, I was just remembering the question I was answering. Now I'm like on the, what was it? Cause I was going to tell you,
which part?
I don't know.
You were saying something about, I don't remember. I was just listening to that story because I thought it was a great story.
Oh, thank you.
About your faith. You're talking about your faith.
Thank you. Yes.
You're welcome.
Okay. So it was this hard season. Oh yeah. Anyone out there who doubts God exists. Okay. So that was me. Right. And, it was, my mid-20s. I'd found out I was adopted. So, and then I didn't know, I had spent years around so many people also who just don't believe in any faith. Right. And all of it kind of accumulates in our life. And I went through this really tough season of like not knowing where I came from. First of all, not being able to find my birth parents, and then just like doubting God existed. And it was this season. And I grew up in the families that I was raised around, never went to therapy, never saw counselors, never anything, right? They either just didn't talk about things or just kind of dealt with them. And I just realized I'm in this place where I started like having panic attacks, and I never had that in my life. And I was really getting depressed. And so I actually saw a therapist for the first time, and it changed my life. Like first of all, she helped me get through the stuff I was dealing with. But there was one day where I said to her, I'm feeling really lost, and I'm actually like, I pray, but when I pray, I feel like a fraud because I'm like praying, yet I'm like doubting God exists at the same time. Like, is this real? And she said to me that day something that changed my whole life. She says, okay, well, and by the way, I don't even know if she has any faith. I have no idea. But she said to me, well, what makes you think God can't handle your doubt? And I'm like, huh? And she goes, I mean, if he created the whole universe, what makes you think he can't handle your doubt? And she's like, tell him you doubt him and then ask him to prove you wrong. And I was like, huh. And so that started a multi-year journey where every time I pray, I, say all the things, thank you, God, all the things. And then I'd pray for other people's health, whatever it was. And at the end, I'd say, and I'm doubting you exist. So if you could prove me wrong, I'd really appreciate it. Like, prove me wrong beyond a shadow of a doubt. Like, show up so there is no confusion in my life that it's you. And, I started that prayer for a long time. And then so many things started happening that literally all but screamed from the rooftop that God exists. So for me, and I share a lot of those in the book, and I share the journey of it, because I think something that's really important, and for any faith, no matter what faith someone practices or doesn't, maybe they just want to tune into the universe, all those things. I think that it's easy for us to think like, oh, I'm not qualified, or I've made, just for me personally, the Christian faith, right? I think a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm too imperfect. I'm too flawed. I've made too many mistakes. It's too late. Like, I'm not.
That's it.
Right?
Too late, for sure. It's a big one.
And
people think that their ship has sailed and they're not able to pursue.
Yeah. And it's just not true. Listen, I have made more mistakes than I can ever count. And I believe, this is my belief. I don't think I've ever talked about this, by the way, on a show, on a press interview, nothing. I believe God does not show up for perfect people who, I think he shows up for imperfect people who literally are just looking for him. You know what I mean? And asking him to come into their life. And so I think like he almost this is what my gut tells me, that he like delights more in people that have gone on a journey and they've lived some life and they've made some mistakes. And like, you know what I'm saying? And
I do.
Yeah. So
no, I think that's there's a lot. That's why a lot of times when you see people who found God, so to speak, it's people who've really for lack of a better word, has screwed up a lot, or who have been down really bad roads, or had to kind of like stumble. They needed to find a way out, and that's when God really kind of shows Himself a lot of times to those people, to people like that.
Yeah.
And it because that faith has helps them stay on the right track and show them the way, so to speak. I don't think that's just by accident that happens.
Yeah, I agree. And the cool thing about it is when like we've lived some life and made some mistakes and had some down, dark seasons and all those things that are human, it's like, then you're actually, I think, better able to know the impact on you personally when God's in your life, and when you seek after Him, because you're like, oh, this is real. This is legit. It's not like, you know what I mean? Because you feel it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, was your husband also on that path, or did you guys find this together? You've been married a while, right? Like, your husband also helped build this company with you.
Yeah. We wrote the business plan on our honeymoon.
Right.
Went all in, and he is on the path, but so different. Like, we're different in really every way. We don't even watch the same television shows. Like, I'll have I'll have The Bachelor on, and he or like Real Housewives, and he thinks it's the worst thing in the universe.
I agree with him.
Yeah, well, he loves like Game of Thrones and like I don't know, and then sometimes he watches stuff where just everything's blowing up, and I'm like, I think it's the
like Homeland or like Homeland or no.
Man, I'm trying to think. Oh my gosh. Anyways, he watches all the shows that would be considered sophisticated and great programming and beautiful writing. And for me, I don't know if it's because I just went through this season of like working 100-hour weeks or whatever, but it was like, for me, I could only watch a show that like I didn't need to follow the storyline.
Yeah, like it's mindless. Like you can tune out, and you can like, it's like silly, mindless. Like that's why those shows like The Real Housewives, I hate to say it because, they came on my show maybe, but that like you don't, it's like a mindless, like it's like a treat. It's like eating like junk food, right? Yeah. Like it's just like a sugary thing that you shouldn't do, but it's fun.
I was just thinking like the Twinkie's bad for you, but you want the Twinkie, and you're like, okay, this just made my life better today. I feel better because I just watched.
It's
whatever.
True.
Yeah.
And it does it. And like, you could just like not think. It's like a very, like, you don't have to think on that level,
Yeah.
And so I get it, especially when you work like that. What would you say is the most important the most important trait would be for success?
I think,
besides believing in yourself, because I think we've spoken about that so much.
Yeah. I think I can give you three things, but
give me three.
I really think that, and it's not just believing in yourself, making the decision to believe success is possible for you. I think that so many of us just think we're not qualified. Or we don't have what it takes, or we don't come from the right family, or we don't come from the right background, or we don't have the right education, or we don't have the right experience, all those things. And I think we talk ourselves out of it. And I think making that decision to believe it's possible is huge, like huge. Some of the things that just come also top of mind is, I talked a little bit earlier about when I was building at cosmetics, and how it wasn't just about finding a product that worked, or I think that so many people can be great at setting goals, and so many people have done enough reading or listened to enough podcasts where they understand the concept of like identifying your why behind what you're doing, right? Which is like your mission for doing it. Mm-hmm. The biggest mistake I think a lot of people make though around this, and it's why they give up, or they stop their health journey, or they, whatever it is, quit the business, or never start it. I think that a lot of people identify a why that they think is the right one, and it sounds really good. And if you share it with someone else, it sounds really good. Like maybe it's like, oh, I'm doing this because I want to buy a house, or I'm doing this because I want to pay for my kids' college one day, and those are great whys, right? Like they sound so great. They make so much sense, but often they're not deep enough and they're not meaningful enough to make sure you don't quit when times are tough. And of all the things, I did so many things wrong. One of the things I did right was like, you have a why, but you have to peel back the layers and go really, really deep, right? So I shared, like, for me, like wanting to shift culture and beauty and help end that process of every little girl about to start doubting themselves, every grown woman who still does, and shift culture on that. That was really deep for me because my whole life I'd felt that not enoughness every time I'd see those beauty images. That was way more deep for me, that mission to do that for other people, than it was to go, oh, I want to buy a house, or, oh, I want to create a great product, or whatever it is. And I think a lot of people, they've got to go deeper. Like, I think they start, whatever it is, and they have a great why, but like they've got to put, I recommend, because a lot of people don't do this, is putting in that work of going deeper and deeper and deeper.
So what the purpose, the real true purpose is, versus just like a surface level.
Yeah. And some people think they know it. Like, maybe it's like, oh, I want to, I want to pay for my kids' school. But if that's all it is right there, for some people, that's not enough. And an example, I'm making this up, but if someone says, oh, you know what? I want to peel back the layers deeper. Maybe the real why there isn't to pay for my kids' college. Maybe the why is to break a multi-generational cycle of complacency or poverty or whatever in your family. And
right, that's a big why.
Yeah. And that could be the same person, right? But they thought their why was to pay for college. And it's easy to then go, oh, you know what I'm saying? But when it's that deep.
But a lot of times people don't even know that why yet. Exactly. They have to go down the path first, a little bit further, to really kind of unravel what was pushing them. Like, a lot of times, like, what, for me anyway, and I know it's a lot of people I know, you go down a path for one reason, and your reasons change as you kind of go through it, right? Yes. And you morph and grow, and then you really find the real why.
Yeah.
But,
and I think,
right?
Totally. And I think that's true. I think when you get to a spot, though, where you're like, I just want to quit, and if your gut is telling you to keep doing it, that's when I think it's the time where you also have to then go deeper and be like, I want to quit, but my gut's telling me not to, but like, why is it I want to give up? And then just like, in those moments, figure out what is that deep, deep, deep why that fuels you.
Right. I agree. And you always knew, well, you had two things going for you. I think the first thing is, we didn't even touch upon this at the beginning of the podcast, but you created your cosmetic company because you had a need for it. You had rosacea that you couldn't find any product to actually help you. So you were kind of filling an ailment that you actually had.
Right.
And a lot of times I feel like when people do that, when they're feeling, when they themselves are needing of something, and then the best products usually bloom from that.
Right.
And having the why. Did you have that why at a young, because reading your book, you had a work ethic. I know you were like, in your yearbook, you said you were like the queen of procrastination, or you were like dubbed that.
Yeah.
But over time, your work ethic became extremely clear, like what a strong work ethic you had. Do you feel like that was a huge part of why you're successful as well? Is because that like 100-hour weeks and kind of grinding like you did, like you just weren't going to take no for an answer, no matter what.
I think not taking rejection personally was huge, which I can share about in a minute. I don't think someone needs to work 100-hour weeks to succeed. I don't think they need to work a third of the amount of hours I worked to have the kind of success I did. I think when I look back, it's one of the things I actually wish I did differently, with the number of hours I worked. Yeah. Because I don't, I pray every day. It hasn't taken a toll on my health and all those things I don't know. But what I realize is that, when after 3 years of solid no's, not paying myself, when we finally, many years after that, started actually, things were doing really well and our accounts were thriving and we were getting into all these stores, I couldn't process at the time, or maybe a better word is I didn't know how to believe at the time that the success was real. And I worried at every single second, it could all come crashing down. And it's another form of imposter syndrome, right? Where
That's what I say.
yeah. And so I drove myself so hard because I thought, oh my gosh, like I need to strike while the iron's hot, like all of that, right? And it never let up. And you know, it was a decade before I realized, oh, I actually didn't yet believe I was worthy of this success. So I couldn't believe that it was happening. And it wasn't until I learned to believe it was real, to believe like it's possible for me, it is happening, I have earned it, all those things, that I was able to better prioritize stuff, that I was able to make bigger decisions. Like, you know, we tried to have a baby. I tried to get pregnant for 10 years and, you know, had miscarriages and so many things. And when we finally welcomed our daughter, she's 2.5 years old now, Wonder, into the world, I was raised with parents that worked so hard all the time and they were often not around. And I just made this decision like, oh, wow, I'm repeating that cycle and I'm not going to do that for my daughter, and it's going to be okay. And my success is going to continue. And it was really just making those big, you know, shifts around that I was better able to do it. But I don't think anyone needs to ever work 100-hour weeks. I did it from a place of, I couldn't believe this success was happening. And I was just driving it so hard because I had a fear it could all come crashing down. And, you know, when I was a waitress at Denny's, I could have never imagined at the time, you know, I always knew like I was supposed to serve in a bigger way and impact and things like that. But I could have never imagined I would have 1,000 employees and, you know, sell my company for over $1 billion cash. Like those kind of things I couldn't imagine. When they happen to us, it's how we react to it. It's a whole other thing, right? And so that's why I did that part. So
I like that you say that. I think that's really true and real because the imbalance, right? When you work that much, you're giving the amount of stress, like you were saying, you were trying to have a baby and like you were so overworked, your body was like shutting down probably in some way, or because of your hormones or probably your cortisol levels, you know, I mean, so unhealthy. And yet it was, I think a lot of people can relate to what you're saying. It's that most people do that because they don't feel like it's real. Like that imposter syndrome is such a real thing. And that's what motivates people to do that. Right.
And I think like, you know, I think that not feeling qualified, not like, you know, all of those things. Right. And I think it's so important we're talking about it too, because I think a lot of people who feel imposter syndrome, you know, which is like, oh, I'm not qualified to be doing what I'm doing, or I don't deserve to have clients trust me, or I don't, you know, all the things we think, right? Depending on our own life situation. But like, I feel like it's human. And I feel like it's important to talk about it too, because a lot of people feel it and they think they're alone in it. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, we all go through it. And for me, you know, I started assembling like a toolkit of things that I would go to, like imaginary toolkit, like quotes, sayings, stories that I would go to when I start feeling that. And, you know, for me, and I think this is universal regardless of people's faith or whatever, but every time I'd start doubting myself or feeling like not qualified or any of those things to be doing what I was doing, yet I felt like it was my calling to be doing it, and my mission and my purpose. I felt like a calling, but so many times I would doubt I was qualified. And there's these famous words I would always go to that would help me. So I'm going to share them in case someone out there needs to hear this right now.
Go for it.
And the famous saying goes like this: God doesn't call the qualified; He qualifies the called. And I would read those words over and over. And to me, they mean, regardless of your faith, to me, they mean if you have this thing you can't shake in your gut, like you're supposed to start the group of moms that gets together and just shares the real stuff over wine, whatever it is, you feel this thing you're supposed to do, start the book, start all those things. Like I believe it's start the business, leave the job you're in, all those things. I think that if you can't shake it, I think it's part of your purpose. I think it's part of your calling. And to me, if something's part of your calling, then it's like, if God doesn't call it qualified, he qualifies the called. To me, that means you have everything you need inside of you already, right? To actually accomplish the calling you were born to walk into. And so when I do doubt myself, which I still do to this day, those are words that I always reference that help me. And so many other lessons I share in the book on things that help, and just because
I love that quote though. It's beautiful. It's a really good one.
Yeah. Thanks. I love your shirt right now too. I really want that shirt. You have to.
Oh, thank you.
I love it.
Thank you.
So
I'll
cute.
send you the name of whoever makes it. I don't even remember.
Okay.
No, it's thank you. What are you going to do now? I mean, like you sold the company. I know you were still acting as CEO until just very recently as well, right?
Yeah, I stayed on as so when we sold It Cosmetics to L'Oreal,
the biggest, by the way, the biggest deal the biggest acquisition they've ever done. Just, it's no big deal, of course, but just the biggest acquisition ever, but ever anyway.
Yeah. And it was this really cool thing. Part of why we decided to do it was like, we were scaling our own mission so quickly in the US, and we just started launching globally. And I realized, oh my gosh, when you start launching in different countries, they all have different HR policies, regulatory compliance, all those things, right? And I'm like, oh wow, okay, we can figure this out on our own, but it's going to take we're going to go a whole lot slower than if we partner with someone, like L'Oreal that has teams on the ground in over 100 countries, and we can try and shift culture around inclusivity and get our message of beauty out there so much quicker than we could do it on our own. And after the acquisition, they made me the first woman to hold a CEO title in their 107-year history at the time.
Yes.
Which was
amazing.
Great. And I agreed to stay on for 3 years. And there's nothing financially holding me to do it. It's just, I think when you give people your word, you want to keep it. And I think when people believe in you, it's good to prove them right if you can. Yeah. And so I stayed on for 3 years. We doubled the size of the business the first 2 years post acquisition, which is crazy and awesome. And then, it really for me came down to a learning to trust myself thing, where 3 years in, for almost a decade, because of our story, I'd hear from lit agents and movie producers, and they'd want me to tell my story. And I was working 100-hour weeks on the business, like legit building it. And I just didn't want someone else to just write a book and have it not be authentic to me. And I wanted to, if I was going to do it, I wanted to be all in. So I actually said no to everyone for years. And then a little over a year ago, I was just like, oh, I just knew it's time. Like I knew everything that I had been through. I don't think it's for me. I really, truly believe, and I believe this of every person, that the journey we go on, the stories we have, the setbacks we overcome or don't, all the things, like I realize my greatest joy isn't selling my business but it's not any of those things. Like those things are awesome. Don't get me wrong, but like it doesn't fill your soul. Like when we know the things we've gone through can be of service to someone else, like that's the ultimate, right? Whether it's our kids or our friends or someone we've never even met that saw our story on Instagram, whatever it is, it's soul filling. And it made me realize like I was ready, and it was hard to leave the company I built. And after 3 years, I knew to trust myself that this next chapter was how can I serve at an even higher level than I'm doing now? And how can I use everything I've gone through? Like I've done, again, a lot wrong, but there's a lot of things I did right in figuring out like how to accomplish my biggest dreams. So it's like now, and what's next for me is literally pouring into every other woman and person on like their own journey of doing that for themselves, including my daughter and my little son Wilder too, Wonder and Wilder, but like pouring into
what great names too.
Oh, thank you. And so, it's really why I wrote this book. It's like my whole prayer for this book is that I get DMs on Instagram and I meet people in person post COVID. I can't wait.
Right.
And they say to me like, oh my gosh, like this story or this lesson literally was the thing that helped me break through the self-doubt and help me, go after this dream, or believe I was worthy of being in a relationship that's healthy, or, not shame myself for my own body, not having a baby, or any of those things, right? Because I think like together, the power of story, and when we learn from each other, it helps us believe and on our own journey, going from underestimated to unstoppable.
Exactly. That's the title is great, by the way. I think besides believe it, the underestimated to unstoppable is exactly what I think is people need to hear, because people feel underestimated. They need to feel unstoppable.
Yeah.
And like I said, I really enjoyed your book. Believe it. I love it. Jamie Marie Kern Lima.
That's so fun. Also, I should share with you too, this is just something fun for your community. So for launch week, right? It's a big launch week of the book. If anyone picks up the book, wherever it's sold, doesn't matter where, we're going to do something special. I just want to share with your community too and it's free, but on our website, believeit.com, the book name, believeit.com. I'm doing my first ever course. It's a 5-part course on how to go from underestimated to unstoppable. And it's free. It's just for anyone who bought the book the week of book launch. You download it for free. And then you also get an action plan workbook that goes with it, which is how to implement all the lessons. It's over 20 pages, but how to implement the lessons from the book in your real life. So anyway, just something fun to share.
That's I love it.
As well. Because it's fun to get free stuff. And so we're like, what can we do that's really awesome for the launch week of the book, and also to just celebrate everyone that's going to kind of go on their own journey, even more powerfully of becoming the person they're born to be.
Absolutely. When is the actual official launch of this book? When does it come out?
Yeah, February 23rd.
February the 23rd.
Yeah.
Okay. That is amazing. So, my God, best of luck. This book is, I think it's going to do very well because, like I said, it resonates, I'm sure, with so many women, so many people, who feel like they're not kind of like self-actualizing where they would really love to be.
Yeah. And so many of us just go through like doubt, and it's like, I feel like it's so helpful to learn everything we can on how to break through it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think you're a great example, role model for that. So,
so much.
No, you're very welcome. So where do people find you if they want to find you or, look you up?
Easiest is probably Instagram. It's, I'm on Facebook and Instagram and all, but Instagram is the one I'm on the most in terms of like DMs and all of that. And so my Instagram is at Jamie Kern Lima. So
perfect. If I'm not, if I'm not following you, which I think I am, I'll start following you right now.
Awesome. Oh, that's so much fun. And thank you so much. And
Habits and hustle, time to get it rolling. Stay up on the grind, don't stop, keep it going. Habits and hustle, from nothing into something. All out, hosted by Jennifer Cohen. Visionaries, tune in, you can get to know them. Be inspired, this is your moment. Excuses, we ain't having that. The Habits and Hustle podcast, powered by Habit Nest.